Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're sitting down with a brand new guest, someone who I'm very excited to talk to, the one and the only Rabbi Brian Zachary Mayer. He's written a brand new book called Rabbi Brian's Highly Unorthodox Gospel, a modern guide to compassion, kindness, and love for others and self. And so, Rabbi Brian, welcome to the show. It's great to have the time with you.
Wahoo! I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for having me. Honored.
Absolutely. So, before we kind of get into the book, I have to say I love the book. I said that on social media. I've said it everywhere. I posted on Facebook, I think like a week ago. I said this is like the best book, one of the best books I've ever read. And I have tons of books behind me and in front of me. And so I've read a lot of different books, but this book has really moved me for a whole bunch of different reasons. And I'm looking forward to kind of getting into it. But before we do, I thought I'd love to set up the conversation by talking a little bit about maybe your journey and a little peek behind the curtain of where you come from in your spiritual journey, because the term rabbi obviously comes with tons of baggage and assumptions, but you, in my opinion, kind of break a lot of those assumptions up and kind of defy what some of those things might mean to us. So maybe share with us a little bit about your journey, how you were raised in regards to spiritual matters, where you are now, some of the highs, the lows, things that took you from there to here, and then we'll see where we go.
Uh, it's a big open-ended,
That's
big
it.
question. Let
Go whatever way
me
you
jump
want.
in. I tell people that part of my relaxed, calm attitude is that I grew up on a very small island, and that helped me be calm. That was Manhattan, New York City. I grew up a rationalist. We went to synagogue, my family. The idea that I would ever become a rabbi, that was not on anyone's agenda. That would come much later. Grew up very rational, very rational. I was president of the math team. Woohoo!
Good times.
Went to college, still rational, but found myself asking the question why a lot, and wound up at there was a rabbi at the Hillel there at Tufts University, and I used to ask him questions, and he said one day you're going to ask me for a recommendation to rabbinical school, and I told him to go fuck himself. Which rabbis are a little looser with language than ministers and priests sometimes.
Good Christian
Went to
Protestants.
rabbinical school. I always thought I was going to drop out. I didn't drop out. I was looking for capital T truth, and what I found were a lot of lowercase t truths. I worked as a regular rabbi at a mainstream congregation for a lot of years until I just couldn't. It just didn't make any sense to me that God would have had a revelation for what we are supposed to do as human beings that's millennia old, and then given the option of following that millennia old map and trying to understand what that meant. Well, why wouldn't God just be talking to us now if God had something to tell us?
Right.
And the calculus worked out that I couldn't continue to hold the Torah scroll and sing these are the words that God gave to Moses when I didn't believe that. So I left out, and I had no other training really except back to math team. So I taught high school math for a lot of years, and as I taught, I found all those little T truths that I had come to realize of, simple things like you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. The more I taught little truths, and I learned about seeing my students, that there was a phrase in academics that says, they don't care what you know if they don't know that you care. And the more I started to care about my students and really dive into the pastor's heart, the more my students opened up, and the easier the math became, because we were all, they knew my heart was in the right place.
Yeah.
I started a blog talking about what I was doing. The blog picked up, and now I'm doing this full time.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good summary of where I am. All right.
That was a good elevator pitch. Yeah, it's good. I like it.
Long elevator.
So when you went to school and you had this nudge of asking why for everything, did that go over well in rabbinical school? Because I know, because I went to, obviously, I went to Christian seminary, and I know Christianity and
Yeah.
Judaism likes to engage a little bit more in that back and forth, whereas Christianity, from my more fundamentalist background, was
Yeah.
don't ask questions. Just believe it.
Yeah, so Judaism, yeah, is one of the things I love about Judaism and the style of Judaism is that questions are welcome.
Mm,
Creeds, we don't do creeds or dogma, but so they were welcome to a point.
mm.
My classmates had a different. They loved me anyhow.
Mm. And one thing I
I
was
wish I had
thinking,
a better. Go
no,
ahead.
no,
Sorry.
no, that's perfect. I was thinking that while you were sharing your story and while I was reading in the book, because in the book you talk a little bit about leaving the synagogue and kind of leaving that machine, so to speak, of being in the
Yeah.
religious, church world. And I felt I had the same kind of experience because I went to seminary, I got my master's of divinity, and then I went to pastor this church. And it was an old Dutch Reformed church. And how I fit in there, I have no idea, but that's where I landed. And I was there for a few years, and I just felt very I felt like I was like a caged bird. Like I felt like I
Yeah.
was my
Yeah. Yeah.
questions weren't welcome. I had to teach A, B, and C, and if I wasn't teaching this, people were asking too many asking questions as to why. And if I skated around the issue of hell, I got hell from from the elder board and from,
Yeah.
from the higher ups in the denomination. I just felt like it was just so much pressure to be something other than what I felt like I was becoming. And I felt like I was at that age, I was 26, I was still finding myself and still finding my faith and my own understanding of God. And I felt like it was just trying to squeeze me into this very narrow lane. And I
That's
had to
exactly right.
preach all these different things. And I just don't I remember saying to my wife, who was my fiance at the time, I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's all I really know, because I went to Bible college and seminary. I prepared my whole life for this. And now I feel like I don't know if I want to do it. And that was a scary
Yeah.
moment for me.
It's. I think ministers, rabbis have this. There's this weird organizational problem that happens, which is you're hired to be an expert by people who know less than you about the subject, but those people are the ones who tell you what you're supposed to teach.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
if I'm the expert, all right, and I say there's nothing behind that door, why do you keep making me open that door?
Right. It's like you want something to be behind that door that isn't
Yeah.
really there.
Also, seminary, somebody explained to me, is built to make machinable parts.
You know?
Seminary is to take all whatever it is that makes you Glenn that's not the same as all the other ministers out there, so
Yep.
that you can fit in and we can just plug you smack into that Dutch Reformed church. And then when you leave, we got another. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean,
Yeah.
dude, you make art all the time. It's about art and creativity. It can't
That's
be
right.
about same.
That's right. That's right. I was saying to my wife, we were talking about this the last couple of months. I said, I feel like when I went to seminary and then I went to pastor the church, I feel like I lost part of myself. I feel like I tried to
Yeah,
really force myself to become what I thought everybody wanted and needed me to be. Like when I rolled into
exactly.
seminary, my first day of seminary, I'll never forget. I roll in and I had this bright yellow truck and the windows down. I had a ponytail. I had tattoos showing. I had cut off, camo
Hmm.
pants. And I walk in and they're like, "Can we help you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm here for my first day of class." They're like, "Oh, is go downstairs in the chapel." So I go in the chapel and everybody's in there with like suits and ties and I'm like, "Oh man,
Hmm.
what have I done?" So I sit down in the corner and one of my professors who I knew came over and he laughed. He said, "Don't let this place change you because they're going to try."
Yeah,
And I did. I let it
and they
change me
do.
because it's you want it,
I
I
don't
wanted to
think
fit
that's.
in. Go ahead, sorry.
I'm gonna cut you off. I don't think you let it change you. That makes it feel like you could have done otherwise.
Hmm.
It it's a huge machine.
Yeah,
It's going to change you.
that's true.
It took me about 3 years after leaving organized religion to find my soul back.
Yeah, this year's been, I mean, talk about art. I've been all about, I hadn't drawn anything since I was in junior high, and that was for various reasons. I put everything away, and this year has been really a year for me trying to get back in touch with my younger self and that person
Mm-hmm.
who I lost track of along the way for all these different reasons. And even like that day I rolled in the seminary, I had Green Day music blasting in my speakers, and
Nice.
I had stopped listening to it for a long time because you have to listen to the Christian music, and blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
yeah, yeah.
And so this year we went to a Green Day concert. They were doing their world tour. We went to the
Nice.
Green Day concert. I've got all my paints out. I'm painting stuff. I'm really trying to get back in touch with that person. And as I'm doing that, I'm finding all these dreams and all these ideas I used to have as a younger person coming back to life.
Nice.
And I feel like I'm re-engaging that
Nice.
person. So yes.
I had I had the same. I was playing Prince in my office as a rabbi, and my secretary, who really taught me how to be a rabbi in a congregation, she said, "You can't play that music."
Mm,
And I it stuck in my head. I changed the music, but it stuck in my head. If I'm supposed to be the moral authority here, which is a weird idea anyhow, why can't I play Prince?
yeah. So did you stop playing it or did you go back to it again later on?
No, I stopped playing it.
Yeah.
And I got embarrassed. I felt a little bit of shame. Like,
Yep.
oh, but why? It's crazy.
Yeah. That was my experience too. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So the book. Let's talk about the book a little bit.
Let's talk.
Obviously, obviously the book was birthed out of your journey, but I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what this book is, where this book came from, and what do you hope it accomplishes as you cut it loose and release it out into the world.
Well, first, I would love if you would tell people what the book looks like. Just
Yeah.
judging the book by the cover, I could tell them, but you're a more honest narrator, so tell me
Yeah, so
what's.
yeah, I've got the book in front of me. So it's this is the obviously the hardcover, but it's just like me, super bright and colorful. The colors are what grabbed my attention. It feels like it's funny that you were a math teacher because it feels like a math textbook in my hands. It
Uh
feels
huh.
like one of
Nice.
those books I'd have to cover with the paper bags back when I was a kid. But it's thick. It's got some gusto to it. But the cover is what caught my attention. And I
Yeah.
saw
It's tie dye. It's
it's
rainbow tie dye on the
how could you not
cover,
love it?
which
I have
is
yeah, so much color. But I completely judged the book by the cover before I even read the
yeah,
title. I saw somebody post
it's
it and I was
great.
like, I gotta get this. I don't know what it is, but I gotta get it.
So the book came out of just wanting to share what I know, and what I know is that we have to unlearn a lot of. I mean, it's what you and I have done. It's that deconstruction. You have to
Mhm.
unlearn what you thought you knew, and I've learned a lot about religion, like the stages of faith learning and what qualities are part of a spiritual life. And if I tell you, like, if you look at the qualities of spiritual life, one of the things is that there's a hierarchy of values.
Mhm.
The spiritual life isn't everything's good. It's there we a spiritual religious life has, this is more important than this,
Mhm.
and this is more important than that. And if I do it out, the most important thing is about love. And I've spent the last 10 plus years just trying to figure out how to teach about love, how to teach about being that kindness. It's sure harder to do. It's easier, faster to have the off the cuff, obnoxious, harsh response. But that's not what we want to be doing.
Yeah.
And so the book I wrote, it's a call to action. I joke that the book answers the question that nobody was asking, which is, what would a gospel written by a modern day rabbi look like?
Right.
And I thought a lot about the movie Oh God, and it's a similar kind of thing. I feel a little bit like the Blues Brothers, like I'm on a mission from God, but in the book I'm very careful when I use the God word,
Mhm.
because I know a lot of people have a lot of baggage with it,
Yeah.
and when I use the word, it might not be meaning the same thing to you as you're meaning the word to mean.
Mhm.
So there's a in the book. I mean, it's not a spoiler. There the first word time God's mentioned, there's a footnote and says, "We'll talk about this word later." And the
Right?
next time the word God's mentioned, says, "I promise we'll get to the word God later." And I think God shows up in chapter 7.
Mm,
We finally have enough delay, and we can actually let's talk about God.
yeah. What I love about the book is that it really is for everybody because you can be whether you're a Christian, you're Jewish, you're an atheist, you're
Yeah.
Muslim. I mean, everybody needs a dose of compassion, kindness, and love for others and
Amen.
self. And I feel like this is like this book, the way I imagine this book is like a giant table with a big feast, and there's something for everybody to chew on, regardless of where you're
Well, it's
at
very
in
funny
your
you say
journey.
it that way. Thank you, Glenn, because the first iteration of the book I sent to the my friend Kathleen, who's the literary agent, and she says, "This is like a smorgasbord, but none of it's good." Uh, and so I had to. She taught me about writing a book, and
Mm,
it, I got my writing skills up. This has been since COVID. Really been working straight on this book. So
mm. Yeah. There's the first you've obviously done a lot of blogging and stuff like that. The way that you
I've written a
write
lot of articles.
the way
Yeah.
you write is very similar to the way I write in terms of like a lot of white space, short
Yeah.
sentences. And I was wondering,
Yes.
is that how you've always written like on your blogs and you kind of wanted to bring that
It's
into
how I've
the
developed.
book?
So
Yeah.
I've been writing a blog since 2006.
Hmm.
So back in the and I've developed I've learned how to write. You know, if
Yeah.
I write every one 40 out of 40 articles a week. I'm sorry, 40 articles a year I write. And if anybody is interested, I send the newsletter, and that's kind of my testing grounds.
Hmm.
I send a newsletter 40 out of 52 weeks a year. It's called the 77% weekly because 40 out of 52 is. I take the reason I do 40 is that today's the last Monday of the month, so there's no newsletter on the last Monday of the month. So I do all the other 40, but lots of white space, and
Yeah.
the hardback version has a ton of white space on the page, and it's really open, and the sentences are short, and uh, it's easier for me to read that way. The paperback is the same great content. It's just a lot of the white space is taken out,
More
so it can fit in
condensed.
a smaller format. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny when I was in seminary, I had a blog as well. I've been blogging for a long time, and I developed that same kind of a style. And I
Yeah.
was like one day I was writing this term paper and I was a miserable time with it because I didn't like the topic. I didn't want to write about it. I was like I got to get into the feel of this. So I decided I'm just going to write this term paper the way that I write a blog post. And so because of
Mm-hmm.
all the white space, the 20-page paper turned into like a 40-page paper because of all the white space and stuff, but I handed it in and my professor he emailed me and said, "Can I see you in my office?" And so I go to his office. He's like, "So
Uh oh.
anybody who would have written this other than you, I would have given them an F." He said, you ignored the Chicago Turabian formatting. You
Yeah, yeah,
ignored
yeah.
this, that, the other thing. He said, but for whatever reason with you, this just
It
works."
works.
And so he said, "I'm
Yeah.
going to give you an A. Don't ever do it again." But he's not gonna, in
Oh,
this building anyway. He said, "But I'm going to give you an A." He said, "In this writing style," I said, "just go with it and do what you will in your life." So he
nice.
was one of my really supportive people in that time of my life. So, yep.
Writing is it's hard. There's that great quote that's attributed to Hemingway. I don't like writing. I like having written.
Yes.
And now that I mentioned that, I think that's also true with our spiritual lives.
Yeah.
We don't like transforming. We
Yeah.
like having been transformed.
That's right. That's right. So the book when I posted it on Facebook a couple weeks ago, I had people ask me, what's this book about? Because it caught their attention just like it caught my attention. And so a lot of my listeners, a lot of people who I'm friends with on Facebook, they come from the same sort of background that I come from, which is evangelical, very more fundamentalist, very far right. And so the way I've kind of positioned this book to them is, you know, it's kind of like for somebody who's eyeballs deep in deconstruction, they're rethinking things, they're frustrated, maybe they're feeling a little bit angry, about things that they've believed, they were taught to believe, growing up, and they're in this place where they're trying to figure out what's next as they're moving through all this stuff. I said the book
Hmm.
really is a good argument, so to speak, for what can be next in your life and kind of where you're
Mm.
going. And so on top of that, you had emailed me yesterday while I was thinking about our conversation, and you said, let's talk about moving people from deconstruction to love. And I love that because really that's what the book is doing. Because
Yeah.
coming from my world, it's I'm right and you're wrong, and you need to be more
Yeah.
like me. And I have to have all the answers. I have to have the right theology, the right doctrines, all this kind of stuff. And love gets really lost in the mix of all that. But
Yeah.
leaving that world, I've gone to the more progressive side of things. And I've noticed really recently that the same energy that was over there on the evangelical side has come with a lot of us over to the more progressive side where it's still I'm right, and it's still this is what you need to believe, and it's still the other side is wrong, and there's still like a lot of that same sort of energy. And
Mm.
so I thought this would be a really good thing to talk about, is kind of maybe digging a little bit deeper into moving from deconstruction to love, because I think a lot of people would think, well, I'm deconstructing but I'm loving, like I'm still, of course I'm loving, of
Yeah.
course I'm compassionate, but
So
take that
let me
apart for
ask
us a
you.
little bit. Yeah, take that apart for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say that you're loving. It's hard to do. Were you cursing at the last customer service rep? Who you gotta, you know, you and I were talking about this right before election.
Hmm.
When the last person called to ask you for money for their candidate, did you hang up on them?
Hmm.
Were you loving to them too? I mean, I think Jesus said something about that, about it's unto the least of these. I have him in my book in large print at one point. It says, frankly, I don't care about your beliefs in God, but if I asked the last five people with whom you interacted, were they kind? I care about that.
Yeah.
I think we're, the angry left, the angry progressive, that doesn't make sense, man.
Hmm.
I understand hurt, and I understand a lot of people were hurt, and when you're hurt, you want to lash out. And as my buddy Larry says, hurt people hurt people.
That's right.
And if you're hurt, you're going to want to hurt, but it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And we have to try to be kind, not to say that we weren't hurt,
Hmm.
not to throw it under a rug, but to explore it, to in a safe space deal with it, and then go out and try our darndest to be loving.
Yeah.
That's all this is all about. I mean, what else is it about? It's about
Yeah.
love.
Mm.
If we're not going to love, where are we going?
Mm.
And I got a great Jimi Hendrix quote that just came back to mind, which was, "When the when the love, when the power of love overtakes the love of power, then we'll know peace."
Mm. Funny, you talk about politics, and obviously election is coming up, and I'm not, I think this might drop after the election, but there's I've noticed like on my Facebook page and just like, reading through people's comments and posts and stuff, it's like I think that's really hit my spirit lately is that I used to stand on that far right side where it was, you can't be a Christian if you don't vote Republican. You have to vote this way for
Right.
these ideals, and if you don't, then you're not a real Christian. And then on the left side, I've also stood on the other side where it's you can't be a real Christian if you do vote Republican. If you do vote for this
Uh-huh.
person, you're not a real Christian. You can't possibly be a real Christian. You're dumb, you're stupid, you don't understand the ways of Christ and all these different things. And I'm just coming to this realization that like it's the same, like I said before, it's the same energy, but just
Yeah.
thrown behind a different candidate and like a different set of ideals, a different set of principles. And there's
Right.
got to be a different way. Like we keep doing it's not just in politics, but we approach this with all different sorts of things. We keep doing the same thing time after time after
Expecting a
time,
different
expecting
result.
different
Yeah.
results, which they say is the definition of insanity. It's just
Insanity.
and
Yeah.
it's so true. And I'm like, I'm just ready for a different way. There has to be a different way.
Well, I think you're doing that,
Hmm.
right? I mean, look at what you're doing. You're doing a different way. You're showing people, and I think that's something that art does. It was Paloma Picasso or the other who said, art is a lie that enables us to see the truth.
Mm,
It's that it's through art, it's through your painting, it's through your doing things differently that you can better help us to see
mm,
reality.
yeah, yeah,
And I'd say, let's live artistic lives.
mm,
Let's color outside the lines. Let's do things a little bit different because same's just going to get us the same.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, I have a friend, Brian McLaren. He's a author. He's been on the show a few times, and we were having a conversation one time about, you know, um, how do you love people who have views who are drastically different than yours? You know, whether it's like at the Thanksgiving table, and your
Yeah.
uncle is a huge Trump supporter, and he's throwing all this stuff in the middle of dinner, and you're getting into an argument and it's getting heated. Like, how do you handle those things in a loving kind of a way? And he said something that
Yeah.
has really stuck with me. He said what he does. He said, if somebody comes at me with all their different ideals and they're getting emotional and they're presenting these ideas that are different than mine, he said, I just say to them, wow, I see that really differently. Can you help me understand
Yeah.
more about why you're so passionate about that and where that passion came from? And he said it
Right.
typically
And
disarms the conversation.
curiosity.
Yeah, disarms the animosity that might be there. And either the person will share with you where that came from, or if they have no desire to do that, they just want to fight, they'll just kind of stop talking. He said because they don't want to
But
go deeper
there's
into the
the,
conversation.
I think is a Buddhist word, shempa, which
Mm,
translates as heat. And if you come at somebody without the heat and say, well, that's fascinating. I see it completely differently than you.
yeah,
And there's no heat behind it, then it opens things up.
that's right.
We can even tell people, I mean, the way I told the rabbi in school, go fuck yourself. There was no heat behind it.
Right.
It wasn't go fuck yourself, man. It was go fuck yourself. It was playful. It was loving. I think that will keep us open is to be to. But a problem is that we really want to be right and we want things to be simple
Yeah.
and we want it to fit in a box
Yeah.
and it just doesn't. And it's
Yeah.
like trying to hold water with a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Like
That's right.
it's gonna hold some water, but it's not gonna work well.
Yeah. 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 I've been in this place in my journey where I've been embracing, I guess, more of like you call it like a mystical mindset, or the embracing
Yeah,
the mystery of things.
yeah. Well, so that's one of the qualities of spiritual life is that the questions are more important than the answers.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like I've brought that into, and people haven't really liked that much because a lot of people, a lot of people tell me you got to take a stand on different things. You've got to go out there and you've got to say what you believe about, regards to politics or
And
religion, whatever.
right,
And I've said, I'm trying to embrace the mystery. And part of the mystery is that if everything fits, if everything is welcome at the table, that means that the person who thinks differently than me is also welcome at this table,
yeah,
and that is a mystery to me as to how that person's ideals might fit into the grand scheme
yeah.
of things, but they do. And I'd rather try to learn from them and try to understand their perspective as opposed to just sit here and tell them why I think that they're wrong. I think that goes much
Right.
further in the grand scheme of things than the other way that we've been doing over and over again.
Openness and curiosity. I'm going to go back for a second. I'm going to score point two for me quoting Jesus, but I think it was in Luke where it said, "Anyone can love those who love them, but how do you love the people who disagree with you?"
That's right.
And the answer is it takes patience and openness, and but it's doable, and it's not easy. First time you do it, it's going to be awkward,
Yeah.
but be willing.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to me about Lovasaur, because this is a perfect segue into that. And I have to tell you that I was in the book. So for our listeners, there's activities in the book that Rabbi Brian has for us to do, and
And in the
there's
hardcover edition, it comes with sticker and a sticker chart. to do.
Yes,
The
there's sticker
paperback does not
charts.
come with the sticker chart.
That's right. And I did
Um,
sticker three. I got sticker three because I drew my Lovosaurus. So I put it
okay,
in
it's
there. And my
great.
Lovosaurus is very simple. He's just this heart
I see it. I
with
got it.
antenna eyes. That's how I picture him.
So the Lovosaur exercises. So first, SAUR.
Mhm.
Those four letters are very important. This is a behavioralist definition of love. The S stands for seeing,
Mhm.
and then the A stands for accepting, the U stands for understanding, the R stands for responding. And to love someone, you have to SAUR, SAUR. You have to see them, accept them, understand them, and respond to them.
Mhm.
And I use the Lovosaur because SAUR looks like a dinosaur. It's the same kind of ending.
Yep.
So I came up with a Lovosaur. Well, actually, somebody in my service came up with Lovosaur, and gave me permission to use it. So I'm using Lovosaur, and I find, and Glenn, you're the exception. You do art all the time.
Mhm.
That a lot of adults have a hard time making art because it doesn't look the way that it doesn't come out the way that they want it to.
Yep.
So we're deep in the book already. By the time we get to Lovosaur, we've talked about what love is. And I asked people to draw a Lovosaur. And I say, here's the easy thing is nobody knows what a Lovosaur looks like, so your
Right.
picture's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And then later in, there's a drawing done by, I have a neighbor who's no longer 3, but when he was 3 years old, he drew a picture of me.
Mm.
And I promise it's worse than anybody's drawing of a Lovosaur that ever was. But nobody would ever say to Luca, hey kid, your picture's shit. Like, it's an awful picture. We all know how to treat a 3-year-old.
Mhm.
And the question I ask is, why are we treating ourselves worse? And so the Lovosaur is something that I encourage people to go back to, is look at the picture of the Lovosaur you drew, and can you believe that it's lovely? Can you believe that it's wonderful? The same way that you would treat a 3-year-old.
Mm.
And if not, and often it's not, let's explore that. What's behind not loving ourselves?
Mm.
Why are we treating ourselves worse? And it can't because we're older and wiser, because wiser does not mean treating yourself worse. Wiser
Right.
means treating yourself kinder.
Yeah.
So we have to explore. So I'm glad you did a picture of the Lovosaur. I love when people, and I think I even encourage in the book people to send pictures up to Facebook
Yep.
to share their Lovosaur picture with others.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. Maybe I'll do a painting of a Lovosaur.
Do it.
Which one of those four pieces do you think? Let me ask you this: which one of those four pieces is the biggest challenging? Is the most challenging one for you?
Seeing, accepting, understanding, responding.
Yeah.
I just said them out again so that people could learn them. And
If
I
you're a
could
teacher,
stall
that's
for
why.
a second. I am. I'm a teacher. Which is the hardest to do? Is that the question?
Yeah, which one's the most challenging, like for you on a
Most
regular
challenging.
basis, or has been in your
Seeing
life?
people I can do in the regular day. I just, I was at the supermarket and I said to the cashier, oh, look, you have really long purple fingernails.
Mm.
Because she had really long purple fingernails. So seeing is easy. Accepting. Accepting, I think that might be the hardest one. Understanding is compassion. I can get there and responding. But where I get stuck is accepting.
Yeah.
Is I get stuck accepting that what you're doing isn't what I would necessarily do. Maybe that's where I get stuck.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to think more on that.
Yeah, I would say the same because I think coming from my background and maybe even coming from your, background, you know, for me it was very much people need to think like me. People need to be like me. People
Yeah.
need to
I
believe like
think
me.
of it that. So here's a simple example. We're as a family. Let's say we're all going to go for dinner,
Hmm.
and I think we're going to go to one restaurant, and the family says, "No, let's go to this place instead." I have a hard time changing gears. Like
Hmm.
I thought this is the way we were going to do things, and so it's really the acceptance part.
Yeah.
I get attached to plans in an unhealthy way, and I'm really seeing,
Same.
yeah, seeing just how, And it doesn't matter. I know it rationally. I know, like, I don't care, but I was attached to this outcome of the world.
Yep.
And that's my wedding stone right now. It's what I'm
Yeah.
rubbing up against,
Yeah.
sharpening me.
Yeah. I've been talking to my daughter, she's 7, and this is her first time being around any kind of election politics stuff, especially in school.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't ready for this to happen, but she came home one day. It was 2 days in a row. One day she came home and she said, um, so and so said that if Donald Trump wins, all this stuff is going to happen, and he hates Donald Trump. Okay.
Hmm.
And so then the next day she came home and it was the opposite. She said, and this other person told me today that if Kamala wins, all this stuff's going to happen, and she hates Kamala and she hates Joe Biden. And she's like, so what do I do? Like she didn't know what she was like. Her brain looked like it was exploding because she had these two people in her
Yeah.
class saying two different things. And I said, well, I said, here's the thing. I said, when it comes to these types of things, I said the people who support one side are going to say they don't like the other side, and they're going to try to make you afraid of what's going to happen if the other side wins because of, they want this person to win. I said the other side is going to do the same thing. I said I really don't think that your classmates hate any of these three people. I said I think it's probably what they heard at home. I said because I don't really think that
Yeah.
little Bobby or little Susie, knows anything about Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris to make that kind of a judgment. I said, but at the end of the day, I said one of these two sides is going to win. And I said, it really, you and I have very little control over what's going to happen on that day. I said, but what we do have control over is when we go to school the next day and we go to work the next day or whatever, how we treat the other people. I said, because
Yeah.
whether they vote for Kamala or they vote for Donald Trump, I said they still are living, breathing human beings just like
Yeah.
you and me. And I said, we get to choose how we're going to be towards those people. I said, I think that's the most
We we
important thing.
we can choose.
Hmm.
We can choose and then take some work. There's an idea by Melanie Klein, who's like Freud and then Jung and the Melanie Klein in the
Hmm.
lineage there. And she said when people are stressed, they tend to go binary thinking and make it us versus them.
That's right.
And we hold on to all the good is us
Yep.
and bad is because of them.
Yep.
And it's splitting and it's just not it's just not reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why, I mean, that the us versus them is what wins, whether it's an election or whatever it
Yeah.
is, like that's what wins. And again, coming from my background, it was us versus them. It was the Christians versus everybody. And you got to evangelize the world and you got to make everybody
Yeah.
believe like we do. And if they don't, then they're the enemy or the enemy's got them.
Yeah.
The devil's got them.
Th-
And it's a
there's a
dichotomy.
yeah, i- except it's really hard to stand on God is love and God loves everyone when like there's some cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
There's something wrong when you're frothing at the mouth and angry
Yep.
that people aren't loving.
Yep.
Like what?
Yep. Yep. And I didn't see that when you're in it, you don't see
It's
it.
hard.
But like
Yeah.
I remember for me, the most eye-opening moment, I've talked about this on the podcast before, was when my daughter was born. And I was just starting to deconstruct. I was starting to rethink things like quietly in my head because I'm like, I have questions, but I don't know what to do with them, but I don't have any safe place to bring them. So I'll just mull over them in my head. And I remember I was in the NICU. She was rushed to the NICU and everything's happening super fast. And they put this thing on me and they're like, here, she's in the tank. You can put your hand in there. I'm like, I put my hand in the tank. They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. Put my hand in the tank. And this little hand reaches up and grabs my finger. And it was the moment that like my theology just exploded because
Mm-hmm.
I was brought up with original sin, which you talk about in the book, how that's not even like a thing, but I was brought up with it. And I was like, I remember in the NICU thinking to myself in that moment, how can original sin possibly be a thing? Like, how can God be
Yeah.
mad at this beautiful, beautiful little girl? I said, I'm
Yeah.
her father, and there's nothing this girl could ever do that would make me feel any differently about her. I don't care what it is. I said, but yet I sing
Yeah.
about God on church on Sundays that he's a good, good father. how could I be a better father than God? I remember us having this
Right, right, right.
crisis of theology,
It's
but
beautiful.
that's when everything started to change for me of this love talk, is that like there has to be more to it than this simple systematic theology that I was given. And you can't be angry. There can't be any of this anger and this frothing at the mouth, like you said, if love is involved. It does not make any sense.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So original sin, just if can I expand on that for a
Riff,
moment for the
go.
listeners? Yeah. So
It's
original
big in
sin.
Judaism, right? I know it's really big in Judaism, isn't it?
No, we don't have.
Just kidding.
It's not. Original sin starts with Augustine
Hmm.
in the third century. The word original sin's not in the Bible at all,
Nope.
except in some apocryphal books. But there, it's only used to say there is no such thing as original sin.
Yep.
There's no. It's and I wrote in it. If you want to believe that humanity is cursed, believe that because you chose to believe that, but don't believe it because it's God's. It's not in the Bible. It's not God's will. It's you chose to believe that, and you can choose otherwise.
Yep.
You don't have to believe that we're all sinful. Try it out.
Yep. Try it on. See what happens.
Try it. If you don't like it, money back guarantee. Actually, so I just came up with this idea, Glenn, on the book, is that if you don't like my book, I will refund your purchase.
There you go. I like it. All right, you have let's flip the table for a minute because you had some questions you wanted to ask me about the book,
Yeah.
and I want to answer them.
So I did. So on the other end of the table, what's something that you read in the book that you went, oh, snap doodles?
Hmm. So I will say, first of all, I'll say that I don't think there's anything in the book. This is gonna sound weird, but I'll explain it. I don't think there's anything in the book that I didn't already know.
Uh huh.
I feel like what the book did, which surprised me, is once I got about halfway through, I realized this was happening, is the book is uncovering in me what's already there,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
that's beautiful.
I feel like the book is showing me like things that I've always intuitively knew, like even simple things like I've known now intellectually I know about original sin. I know it's not in the Bible, but it's still in there because it was hardwired into me, indoctrinated as a child, and so it's still in there. But I've always known in my heart of hearts like it doesn't make any sense. But what this
Yeah.
book did, and I wish I had this book a lot earlier, but I have it now. But what the book did is
I'm
almost
sorry.
give me
I'm
this
sorry, dude. That's my fault. It took a
it's
while.
all your fault. What the book did is give me this permission slip to listen to that intuitive voice inside
Oh, I
and
love
say,
that.
this, you can listen to this still small voice inside that you were told
Yeah.
to ignore in favor of the bigger voices around you that know better than you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That was a hot
I
moment for
love
me.
that.
Yeah,
As a permit, it is a permission slip to think on your own,
that's right.
and to. Oh, I love that. I'm going to quote you on that.
Do it.
What would you tell people about the tone of the book?
Tone of the book is it's almost like we're sitting at Starbucks, having coffee. It's very conversational. Like I feel like
Yeah,
you're telling me stories, and in my head I'm engaging with the story. And what I love is that there's certain moments in the book where you tell a story, but you don't tell me what it means. And you just kind of tell the story and then you move on to the next thing. But that's very like Jesus like because I was, grew up in the Gospels, and there's so many times where Jesus will tell a story and he'll just go on to the next thing. And sometimes his
yeah,
disciples are like, "What the heck is that supposed to mean?" And
yeah,
I felt that while I was reading the book, but it felt very conversational to me. It's very you're sharing stories about your life, these big ideas that you have, and I felt like we were just kind of sitting down having coffee and chatting.
yeah.
Yep.
That's intentional. That's one that it's written to the person. So I break the fourth wall a lot in the book, and
Hmm.
I write directly to the reader. Dear
Yep.
reader, I want you to know blah 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 blah.
Yep.
So yeah,
Hmm.
that's wonderful. It makes me happy. Um, what books does this book remind you of?
Um, I think there's two books that come to mind. The first is the writing style. I have it up here actually. Let me get it. I'm gonna show you. There's a guy named Rob Bell. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so Rob Bell, he wrote Velvet Elvis was my first Rob Bell book, but he writes, very similar to us with a lot of the white space and stuff. But he has a book called Everything is Spiritual, which is kind of like
Uh
his
huh.
memoir. And this book reminds me a lot of that book because it's very memoirish for you as well, where you're telling us your story, but you're weaving it into these big ideas that you've learned over the course of your life and the different things that you're even learning now. And this book reminds me a lot of that. And then also, Elaine Pagels, who's been on the show before, she does a lot of work in the Gnostic area. And you mentioned Gospel Thomas in your book, and I think a couple other of
Yeah.
those books. But anyway, she wrote a book called Why Religion, which is also her memoir, and she talks about what she's come to learn about God and her own spirituality in the midst of like immense loss and different things like that. So this book kind of falls into those two categories for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you ever happen to read a book, and this is not a popular one, by Gordon Mackenzie called Orbiting the Giant Hairball?
No, I love the title already.
Yeah, so he was a illustrator for Hallmark,
Okay.
and his style of writing the book is he draws little pictures on the page, and it's an artist's book.
I love it.
And I hadn't considered it, but if anybody out there knows that book, my book is written the same way that there's some drawings in my book from
Yep.
time to time, and
Yep.
it's making use of the media. Um, the other one was what explain the cover, title, and subtitle, but you already did that, and those are all the questions I prepared. I'm a much better interviewee than than. Thank you for the opportunity, though.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, hey, we're just about out of time, but this has been a lot of fun.
Can I entice people if they go to shop.rabbibrian.com
Yep.
and they enter in free ship? I'll ship the book to them for free.
Excellent. I'll put that in the show notes. And is that the only place where people can get the book?
Yeah, because I started this new policy, Glenn, very recently, which is I'm off of Amazon. I don't need a man who is censoring the Washington Post to get any more of my money.
That's right.
So I'm off Amazon, and also I have the ability to offer a refund if you buy it direct,
Yeah.
and you can't do that on Amazon.
Yep. And the book comes in hardcover and softcover.
Comes the hardcover gift edition, the
Hmm.
deluxe hardcover gift edition. That comes with the stickers, and
Yep.
it's in the larger format.
Highly recommended,
It,
by the
it
way.
it's really awesome. It's the way the book's supposed to look, but that one's a little. And I'll endorse it to anyone as a gift. It's got a dedication page on it, but the soft cover's a little easier to carry around with you.
Awesome. And is there any other place you want to direct people to? I know you do some Facebook Lives and things like that. Do you want to talk anything about that?
Yeah, if you go to ROTB, as in religionoutsideTheBox.org, and you can find me also on rabbibrian.com. But I run a service Saturday mornings, which is very outside the box. No theology, no dogma. I teased the group that I was going to print up books that would say the Religion Outside the Box hymnal and just make it a sticker to put on any blank book.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'll put the links to all those things in the show notes, and I'm sure we'll do this again.
I don't have to write another book first, do I?
No, not at all. We have more things
Good.
we can talk about.
Okay.
Excellent.